In 1975, a Senate committee uncovered something the American public was never meant to see. Thousands of pages of internal CIA documents detailing experiments on unwitting citizens, assassination plots against foreign leaders, and programs so disturbing that one senator called them a legitimate horror. Not every secret stayed buried. Over the decades, declassified files have peeled back the curtain on 3 programs that pushed far beyond the boundaries of law, morality, and science. Programs the government spent millions to hide. Programs that, once exposed, changed the way the world thinks about intelligence agencies. Let's start with the most infamous, and the one that still haunts Congress to this day. MKUltra began in 1953. The Cold War was in full swing. American intelligence believed the Soviets had developed mind control techniques, methods to erase memory, compel confessions, or create programmed agents. The CIA decided it needed to catch up. What followed was a 2-decade operation conducted across more than 80 institutions: universities, prisons, hospitals, and CIA-funded research centers. The goal? To find ways to control the human mind through drugs, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, and psychological torture. LSD became the primary tool. In one documented case, CIA operatives dosed unwitting American civilians in San Francisco bars and monitored their reactions through 2-way mirrors. In another, patients at a Canadian psychiatric hospital were subjected to electroshock therapy and drug-induced comas as part of experiments funded by the agency. The program's darkest chapter involves Frank Olson. Olson, a biological warfare scientist at Fort Detrick, was given LSD without his knowledge during a CIA retreat in November 1953. 9 days later, he fell from the 13th floor of a New York hotel room. The official report called it suicide. Decades later, his family exhumed his body and found evidence consistent with homicide. When the Church Committee exposed MKUltra in the 1970s, CIA Director Richard Helms ordered all related documents destroyed. Almost everything was gone, but 20,000 pages survived, misfiled in a financial records archive. Those pages confirmed what investigators had suspected. The agency had experimented on its own citizens for 20 years. The outrage was immediate. Congressional hearings grilled CIA officials. New rules governing human experimentation were written. And yet, in 2025, a House oversight hearing reopened the wound. Representative Anna Paulina Luna pressed witnesses over allegations that MKUltra-related experiments continued long past the program's official end. One witness testified to discovering a secret CIA detention facility in Germany. Another raised questions about whether biological agents were tested on vulnerable populations well into the 1980s. The files are still being declassified. The full story of MKUltra, how many subjects, how many deaths, how many institutions were involved, remains unknown. In 1962, the Joint Chiefs of Staff presented Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara with a proposal. The objective was to manufacture a pretext for war with Cuba. The plan was called Operation Northwoods. It was signed by all 5 members of the Joint Chiefs. The document, declassified in 2001, outlines a series of proposed false flag operations. One involves staging a fake Cuban attack on American soil. Another suggests hijacking a civilian airliner and painting it to resemble a Cuban aircraft. A third proposes sinking a boat of Cuban refugees off the Florida coast and blaming Castro's regime. Perhaps the most chilling proposal involves the USS Maine, a familiar name to any American history student. The 1898 explosion of the Maine in Havana Harbor launched the Spanish-American War. Northwoods proposed detonating explosives on a U.S. Navy ship, blaming Cuba, and using the incident to justify a full military invasion. The document is explicit. Casualty lists in US newspapers, it reads, would cause a helpful wave of national indignation. President Kennedy rejected the plan. McNamara shelved it. The Joint Chiefs' signatures remained on the document, buried in classified archives, until a researcher found it nearly 40 years later. Northwoods matters because it is not a rumor. It is not a whistleblower's account. It is a signed, dated, archived military document, approved by the most senior uniformed officers in the United States. The plan was never executed, but the fact that it reached the desk of the Secretary of Defense raises a question that declassified files force us to confront. If this was what they wrote down, what did they never commit to paper? The answer, in part, may lie in a program that sounded like science fiction, until the CIA spent 20 years and $20 million proving otherwise. Project Stargate began in 1978. Its premise was simple. The Soviet Union was spending heavily on psychic research. The US needed to know whether telepathy, clairvoyance, and remote viewing, the ability to perceive distant or hidden targets using only the mind, were real. The program recruited individuals who claimed psychic abilities. They were placed in rooms with no windows, given coordinates or photographs, and asked to describe what they saw. Their reports were compared against known intelligence. The results were uneven. Most sessions produced vague or inaccurate readings, but some reports were striking. In one documented case, a remote viewer described a Soviet submarine facility with enough accuracy that satellite imagery later confirmed specific structural details that were not publicly known. Another session involved a viewer sketching a building that intelligence analysts could not identify, until weeks later, when a source confirmed the existence of a new research facility matching the description. Stargate operated until 1995. It cost $20 million. At least 12 separate laboratories and institutions participated. The CIA eventually shut it down, concluding that the results were too inconsistent to justify the expense. But the files, declassified in 2017, reveal that intelligence agencies took the program seriously for nearly 2 decades. Think about what that means. 2 decades of taxpayer-funded research into whether human beings can see through walls. Stargate may sound absurd compared to MKUltra's brutality or Northwoods' calculated cynicism, but it belongs in the same category for a reason. All 3 programs share a common thread. Each one was created in response to a perceived Soviet advantage: mind control technology, a communist foothold in the Western Hemisphere, psychic warfare. Each operated outside normal oversight. Each was hidden from Congress, from the press, and from the public. And each was exposed only because someone, years later, found the documents. The declassification process is uneven. Some files are released because of freedom of information lawsuits. Some surface during congressional hearings. Others appear decades after the fact in the National Archives, noticed only by researchers who know what to look for. The Task Force on the Declassification of Federal Secrets, active in 2026, has pushed for faster release of intelligence records. But the scope of what remains classified defies easy accounting. Millions of pages sit in vaults, some with programs we know about, many with programs we do not. What arrives in the public record is a fraction, a fragment, and even that fragment contains operations that half a century ago would have seemed too extreme to be real. MKUltra proved that an intelligence agency could experiment on its own people and destroy the evidence. Operation Northwoods proved that the highest levels of the military could propose attacking American civilians, and that the proposal itself, once buried, could stay hidden for a generation. Project Stargate proved that a government could spend $20 million investigating psychic powers and keep the entire program secret for more than 20 years. These are not conspiracy theories, they are declassified documents, signed, dated, archived. The Secret World files are not fiction. They are history, waiting for someone to open them. Stay curious. Subscribe for more fascinating tales from the Secret World files.